together here. If you can in the Zoom chat, maybe just chat where you're coming in from today. I'm based here in Nashville, but would love to hear whereabouts you all are zooming in from. San Antonio, Arizona, Dallas, Texas, Tejas, Arizona, Cali, Indianapolis, all over.
Yeah, you
Okay.
just got flooded with those. Look how quickly those are going through. I would say from one end of the earth to the other.
Yeah,
I think we've got folks. I don't know if it's popped up yet, but we've got folks in Japan, to Germany, and everywhere in between. Really.
Florida. I saw Germany in there.
Oh yeah.
A lot of Texas in there. Knoxville. Hello, neighbor. Japan. There we go. Connecticut.
Awesome. Yeah, no, let's just dive in. Folks should be returning from their break real quick. But John, I appreciate you being here. Just a quick introduction on John Russo. I apologize for that name being incorrect. There is no H in John, it's just Jon.
No worries.
But fellow Army veteran, served our country honorably, and then also went off to serve in some of the highest positions in the corporate world, serving Fortune 500 companies, and now is the CMO and founder of B2B Fusion. So honored to have you here and to speak to our students and give them the best foot forward and kind of dive into a little bit of kind of leadership and expectations and stuff like that through your vast career on the corporate side. But if you could take a moment, John, and just introduce yourself and tell us kind of your story and the path that you've kind of traveled over the last several years, and and then we'll dive into some Q&A and then open it up at the end for questions from our students as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Matt. First of all, thank you for having me participate in this. It's very meaningful for me to continue the tradition that we all started, and it's become kind of a family business. Not a lot of people know about the service outside of the service, so I feel a strong commitment not just to give back here, but I've been doing so for the last 10 years for another organization, Entrepreneur Boot Camp for Veterans, where I'm a donor and advisor, and have been helping veterans start their own businesses. And that's kind of one aspect of my background, which we'll get into in a moment. But helping veterans is a passion area for like a side hustle or a side business, and a value of our corporate business as well. But let me give you a little bit of background. My favorite topic, we'll talk about me. We could talk about that all day. But I was in the service. I was in the Signal Corps. I was in an infantry division in an artillery unit, and I did my obligation time, and decided as my obligation was winding down, I had a choice. I could either continue or try to look for a job. And at that time, I did a hell of a lot of networking, a heck of a lot of search, and found a job. Now, it was a very different time back then, but I first found my first job not too far from where my base was in California, in Silicon Valley. And I had a really good run there. I started off on a low level, and my first job leaving the service, I kind of had the mentality of having a chip on my shoulder. A chip on my shoulder, meaning um, I felt like I had to outwork a lot of my civilian counterparts because they didn't understand what the military was. And, almost, I don't want to say looked down upon, but I certainly didn't feel like I was an equal to their discussions. So I felt like I had to work a little harder than the rest of them to kind of set myself apart. Long story short, I got into a really good situation and didn't know it at the time, but I found this company. Civilian had hired me. His boss was a prior service, and I had no idea that he was prior service, but it was a very veteran friendly environment. And so I got off to a really great start because I landed a company. I had a really clear vision of where I wanted to get to, and I got there. Fast forward, I went through a few acquisitions in high technology, got promoted a few times. I went to graduate school out there in California, picked up a second degree, which was helpful. and just had a lot of success. But along the way, a lot of that I would attribute to the discipline that we have as veterans. We're very, very disciplined. We're very honorable, and we mean what we say. When we say we're going to do something, we're going to get it done. And your civilian counterparts are not like that. And I found that because of that ethos, I was able to get promoted very rapidly throughout Silicon Valley. And I stayed out there for about 16 years in very senior level roles. I found myself as head of marketing for startups. And when we got acquired, they continued to promote me. I'm not sure why or how, but they did. And it was a really great run. Fast forward, I got recruited to the East Coast. I spent another 16 years out in New Jersey. There, I didn't have the same success, but it was a different environment. It was not every culture is the same culture, but I did succeed at a very senior level in New York City as well as in Luxembourg, the country Luxembourg. So I've been a head of marketing in Silicon Valley, New York City, and Luxembourg. Continuing to fast forward, I reached a point in life where I felt like I knew a lot more than my bosses. And one of the other common denominators that we have in the service here is I found like I don't need to be told what to do. I know after a while, you get a feel for what needs to get done. And I started finding it annoying that I was, being judged by somebody who had no background whatsoever in my specialty. And so I'm like, I could do this on my own. What do I need a company for? So I branched out on my own. Now, I think we'll get into this in a little bit, but um, it was a different time then, but it's also a different time now for you. And for many of you, entrepreneurship could be a potential path to leaving the service, particularly those that might be service disabled or filing for a rating. If you have benefits and you have retirement, you may have a lot more appetite for risk than your civilian counterpart might have. So you might have a unique opportunity, which we can delve into a little bit later. But fast forward, I've been running my business now for over a decade, about 12 years. Now I'm currently based in Nashville. I'm rounding out the chapters of my professional career, so I'm looking for ways to continue to give back, such as this forum. So, long story short, I've had a successful career as a head of marketing. I've had sales responsibilities. I've had graduate degree experience. I've started my own business and small business experience, and that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate you covering your backstory and stuff like that, and kind of telling us kind of the unique opportunities that you've been able to touch through your career. And I want to focus on obviously two pathways, right? Because obviously we've got some folks in our student body that are excited, they're willing to take that risk to go off to entrepreneurship and kind of be their own boss, right out the gate. But then obviously we've got folks that are looking for their first job, right? Whether they're taking their skill sets that they learned in the military and kind of applying them to a civilian career or doing a pivot. And I want to take first, that opportunity to speak to those folks that are kind of taking their skill sets, applying to a job, and kind of, making that first step into a career. Through your vast experience and working with people, and obviously seeing military leave the service as well. What has been one thing that you've seen, like as far as leadership goes, that has really catapulted someone from the service, whether that be 4 years, 6 years, or 20 years, that's really made an impact out the gate in a company?
Yeah, good question. From a leadership perspective, I would say that on the commercial side, so I'm setting aside somebody who's working for the federal government. I'm setting aside anybody who's working for local government, but like a commercial gig in the leadership that I've seen with transitioning veterans and those that have been successful, in many ways, I see one of the most successful traits is being able to translate what you've done in the service to language that others understand and use.
Yeah.
So on one hand, it's almost like you're shedding an identity of, we had a lot of structure in the service, right? We'd salute, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. We had regulations. That's great for that environment. Now we're in a new environment, and that new environment requires adaptation to the language and the culture that they operate. And the successful executives that I've seen that have been able to make that transition, they don't discount their military service, but they move past it, and they look for ways to kind of fit into this new world or new environment, if that makes sense. Now, federal and state and local government, different animal. You may need to retain a lot of that same identity because it's more meaningful there. But on the civilian side, it's a different animal.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And we've had a lot of folks come in and kind of say that, talk about the language, I guess you would say language barrier, as it were, between military and civilian service. Um, you know, Obviously with your career and your translation over to, the Silicon Valley and stuff, what's some of the best ways to communicate that? Because, we have people that say you need to be able to translate this to that, and, navigate the language differential between military but what's truly at the heart of that, and how do we get to a point where we are able to translate that to civilian speak, as it were?
Yeah, it's the translation to civilian speak's not an easy, like a flip of the switch and boom, you're there, because it's still ingrained us in us today, right? Like it's not something you easily change overnight. But what I did find helpful and what would recommend, I'd actually recommend two things. One, to the ability that you can network with people outside of the service, friends, relatives, other peers that have made the transition. Um, I'd go light on the recruiters. We can get into that afterward. Anybody that you can really talk with, get out to conferences, trade shows, your local chamber of commerce. Look for ways to get talking with people. And in those conversations, that's your opportunity to either hone your pitch, define your pitch, work on the language of, hey, this is what I've been doing and this is what I'm looking to do. Like, it's an opportunity to practice and rehearse. So I would look for those kind of opportunities. And of course, the other flip side now, and I see this as a strong net positive for everybody on this call, is AI. AI can do all that translation for you. Um, I wouldn't rely 100% on it, but you could certainly do scenario planning with ChatGPT, with ChatGPT 5, and just ask questions about it and say, "Hey, here are my skills. How would this best pretend you are a corporate HR recruiter. How would you best interpret this information?" You could do it that way too. So, like scenario planning, and I'll drop in the chat. There's a really good um, software called Humantic.ai, which it will give you a disc profile, which is kind of a personality profile on people that you meet, and it feeds into LinkedIn. So if you're meeting with people that are on LinkedIn, I have found that with a high level of confidence, it tells you how to speak with them. So, um, long story short, you got to practice. It's a process. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not comfortable getting out. Where do I start? You got to start somewhere. Somebody chatted in here, VFW. You got to start somewhere and just continue to chip away at that and shed that military identity if you're looking for a civilian job and adapt into this new environment. You got to have those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And, obviously Cedric here is the one that posted about VFW and get connected with them and asking questions and talking with those folks, right? Because they've been out for a while and they've seen a thing or two. And then also, yeah, ChatGPT is something we talk about all the time. I've never heard of Humantic.ai before. I appreciate you posting that, and, something we can dive into and look into. But obviously, you mentioned doing stuff that's a little bit uncomfortable, getting out of our comfort zone and stuff like that. And obviously, I want to pivot into maybe something that's really on the forefront of being uncomfortable and maybe taking risk is the opportunity to be your own boss and take the ability and skill sets that you have and the leadership styles that you have to pursue something that maybe you're a little bit passionate about. And there's so many opportunities out there for service members to get connected with franchises and business aspects and stuff that we're creating something completely that is unique to you. um, Obviously for those that are maybe pursuing that path, obviously with everybody here that's going through SkillBridge, most of everybody here is going through SkillBridge. That's such a great place to start. How would somebody capitalize on the fact that they may have 2 to 3 months of time where they're still being paid by by their service to take that step, that first step into business ownership, or franchising, or those pipelines?
Yeah, gosh, 2 to 3 months is fantastic if you have that opportunity. In retrospect, I wish before I started my company, I had that 2 to 3 months. I didn't run it consecutively like I ended up doing because running a business takes a lot of time to kind of get up to speed. And so, um, I think in if you had like a 2 to 3 month gap, where I would be focused on would be uh, testing your hypothesis with potential buyers to see if there is a need for the type of thing that you want to go do, whether it be franchising, starting a nail salon, starting a flower shop, doing something related to AI. Um, you could certainly test that with potential people on the outside to get feedback as to, would they buy it? Is there a market there? How deep is the market? I would spend some time on the website and, beginning for very cost effectively, you can create a website. So I'd be spending time doing that. I would be brushing up on a strategy or a game plan as to how you're going to um, tell people about what it is that you do. So, you've got tools today that didn't exist when I made the transition. YouTube being one, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn. And to give you an example, like I've got 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. I've got 350 videos on YouTube that I've done over time. Got 5,000 followers on Twitter. Like all of these things are elements that you can begin to experiment with or begin learning. So I would definitely be doing that. And I would probably do that even if I were looking for a full-time job, because people have to know who you are. And thank you for my 10,000 first follow there. I think technically it's like 9,600. I don't know the exact number. I drive my kids crazy because I tell them I'm an influencer. They don't see it that way, but I'm just dad. But anyway, I would play around a lot with those tools. The other thing I'll say is, although you didn't ask this question, but it's somewhat related. First of all, I think as veterans, we are, whether you start a business or you go into a business, the skill sets that we have are way above and beyond anything in the civilian world. And don't let anybody tell you any differently. You know, I remember command saying, "Oh, you'll never make it on the outside, or you don't have bullshit." The skills of being disciplined, of following through, of never quitting, our civilian counterparts don't have any of that stuff. The lack of discipline is just mind-boggling. It is absolutely mind-boggling. So those kind of traits will translate really well whether you start your own business or if you go out on the commercial side. That said, in my entire professional career, I think this is probably the most challenging environment that I've ever seen for any kind of business right now, because there's just a lot of uncertainty. So, on one hand, you've got the skills on the positive. On the not so positive is holy shit, there's a lot of uncertainty. But on the positive, and I go back to this AI, every business is flummoxed right now. It's like this is the opportunity of a lifetime. I've only seen this one other time when the commercial internet was rolled out. with AI, the opportunities of teaching people AI, of applying AI into niche businesses, the ability to reduce costs for businesses using AI. Everybody doesn't know what to do with AI right now. And because everybody's like brand new, it's like almost everyone's starting from the same starting point. So there's a tremendous opportunity to reinvent leveraging AI. And there are certificates that you could get online for that. You could go to Coursera, or I'm assuming SkillBridge would have something there. There, I see a tremendous opportunity. So I'm giving a really long-winded answer to your question of where would I focus in 2 to 3 months. There's a ton of places that you could focus, and I think the key thing is you're doing something. You're not waiting until, oh, I'm waiting until I get out of the service and then don't do it serially. If if you have the opportunity to run it concurrently, like as you're in the service, you're investigating that next path, or perhaps you're investigating another degree, because you've got a lot better benefits than I had when I was getting out. You've got a lot of opportunities there, certificate-based programs, degrees. I'd be parallel pathing all of that as much as possible.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. In your current, obviously with B2B Fusion, I'd love to explore kind of what you're doing, through your business now. And obviously you said through, what you do, you still pour back into the veteran community to help veterans start businesses and stuff like that. And I want to explore a little bit about that and ask you what, B2B Fusion's all about, what you guys are doing, and how you're still using what your job is essentially, and then still giving back to the veteran community through that process.
Yeah, good question. So what I realized very kind of mid-career was a lot of the technology was shifting underneath me, and I didn't have a really good grasp of it as a senior leader. And because of that, I didn't have confidence in my own abilities of trying to figure out what to do or what not to do. And I was relying, it became a big bifurcation of my knowledge and then relying on fresh graduates right out of college. And I felt a little bit naked. And the technology was Salesforce.com, which is a CRM system, customer relationship management. It's a system that houses data for sales and marketing. I knew nothing about it. I knew kind of at a high level what it could do. Uh, but I began a business in that optimizing of Salesforce for business to business companies, typically from 100 employees to 1,000 employees. Usually it's like an empty shoebox, Salesforce.com. You buy it, and then you have to configure it for the sales and marketing processes. And over the years, I developed a small team that's global in nature, and we optimize Salesforce.com, the software, for those businesses. I knew nothing about that getting into it. I kind of jumped into the deep end of, holy shit, if I don't learn this, I'm going to be totally irrelevant. And now I know it like, I don't want to say like the back of my hand, but I know it a lot better today, 12 years later, than I did 12 years before. Um, so that's kind of our day-to-day business. It really has nothing to do with the veteran side. I've just always maintained a philosophy of I try to give back in every regard. So in my business, I put a lot of content out. So for my 10,000 first follower there, you'll see that I post a lot to LinkedIn. I try to give a lot because I know if I put a lot of good juju out there, it'll eventually come back to me. And 10 years ago, I got involved with the EBV, which is a free program for veterans that are starting businesses. I would encourage you, I don't want to discourage, from your, Seven Eagle Academy, but there's also other programs. If you start a small business like EBV, free to veterans, it's a multi-phase program. I can drop you a link on here afterward. But long story short, I began volunteering for that 10 years ago, and it just reignited my passion. I'm like, gosh, I, you know, I forgot that I have this as part of my identity, the service. And the reason I'm so successful, I felt at that time, was because of the service. Wouldn't it be great to be reconnected and give back? And so, across four different regions, actually, technically five different regions in the US, I've either spoken at, um, been an entrepreneur in residence, meaning the number two person. Somehow I've developed a niche within the veteran community to give back. In fact, I think one of your speakers, Adam Peters speaking, if you know?
Yeah, he speaks in our foundations course every week.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so solid guy. He was one of my students. And yeah, I could be learning a ton from him. Like, and that's, he's a classic example of another reason why I like to give back is I started talking with the guy. I'm like, I'm learning more from him than he's learning from me. Like, it was unbelievable. So it's just a great opportunity to kind of contribute. So I made sure when we were developing our core values for our company that one of those was we give back to our community, and that's how I do it. I lead, my other team members do differently, but I try to give back to the veteran community.
Yeah, no, and we appreciate everything that you pour back into us, and like I said, we appreciate you coming here and kind of telling your story and giving your insights on your career and what kind of worked and your progress. And you mentioned something a little bit ago. Obviously, when you were getting into the Salesforce.com process, you didn't know what you didn't know, and you kind of started connecting and bringing in a circle of individuals that maybe knew a little bit more than you, but you were the lead of this group to kind of pull things together and then start this company moving forward. Um, with that, what is your biggest recommendation for those that maybe are looking to get into the entrepreneurial side and make their own thing? What's one piece of advice that you'd give them to reach out to folks that maybe know more than you do about a passion of theirs?
Ooh, one piece of advice.
Well, maybe a couple. We could, your top five.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, there could be a couple things that come to mind. Like, but let me make sure I'm understanding your question. Like, so what's the top advice for somebody who's making the transition, or like what would be
Yeah,
most
looking to
helpful?
go into building their own service brand company, or passion of theirs to go into entrepreneurship, like to bring in the folks that maybe that know more than they do into the circle.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think there's a couple good resources that I would definitely look at, and one of them, which I teach at EBV, this book called "Sell Yourself" by Cindy McGregor. How you pronounce her last name? McGovern. You can get on eBay for like $7, or you can get it new 26. This is one thing that, as veterans, whether you're going entrepreneur or even civilian, they don't teach us in the service how to sell ourselves. We always just accomplish our mission. And having resources like this kind of gives you a step-by-step guide on how to position yourself, how to sell. Um, because especially if you're starting a business, you're really selling yourself, and you got to put yourself out there quite a bit. And this book would be one piece of advice that I would give. And in fact, I not only to Adam did I give him and the rest of his class hard copies, but I'm giving hard copies next week to the Nashville class. So, um, I think that's one piece of advice that I would give. The other would be uh, I think if I look back at the service, and I don't know if there's any operators on here or any SEALs or anybody in special operations community, what they've done particularly well is they're not afraid of failure. And I've seen this in the classes over the 10 years that I've been teaching Entrepreneur Bootcamp for veterans. They actually like relish failure. And what they do is they take in information and they realize that the first time that they go out, it's not going to be perfect. And they just iterate and iterate and iterate. So it's like they're constantly getting feedback. They're testing and iterating, testing and iterating. And the operators that have come through the program have typically been where they're able to shed the military identity, which is not an easy thing to do. Um, they have a willingness to take risk that I don't see as much on the veteran side. So if there's another piece of advice I would recommend is try to model off an operator. Um, the Way of the Seal by there's a couple guys that have written books, Brandon Webb and Mark Devine. I've read a couple, and I'm an Army guy. Like the last thing I want to be doing is reading about Navy guys stuff. But their books were really, really good. In fact, I probably should have had those as examples. Maybe I can grab a couple of those copies going into my EBV class next week. They're really, really good books. And they talk about like Brandon, um, enlisted SEAL. He built a business that was $15 million business. I stole some of his concepts. I actually leveraged his VA assistant that he had because I read his book and I was angry. I'm like, how the hell did this guy build a business that's 15 times larger than mine? He's brilliant. He's smart dude. Now, whether he was respected in the special operations community, I have no idea. But business wise, he was incredibly savvy. So I would look for examples like that of Brandon Webb or Mark Devine. Their books were outstanding. Um, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
No,
that's
no,
where I would start.
yeah, no, it does. And those are great starting points and great highlights and stuff like that. And for those that are pursuing that aspect. And even like you said, even the book that you held up, right? Selling Yourself, you can use that and understand the techniques that it takes to, you're right, sell yourself to an employer, right? To start to get your foot in the door at a your first job out of the military, right? Because that's what you're doing through is through written word, as it were, for resume writing anyways, is trying to communicate your value to a company on why they should hire you over somebody else, right? And obviously that hopefully lands an interview and you can start growing from there, right? Through I'm going to open it up to questions for our students here in just a minute. But, obviously over your course of your career and then looking back, I know you spent, some time and you did your first enlistment or your first time as a telecommunications officer in the Army. Were you stationed at Fort Ord, by the way?
It was, yes. Yeah, not too many people know that
Yeah,
Fort Ord
I looked
existed.
at you were in Monterey and I was like, oh, you must have been because I lived on Fort Ord when I was out in Monterey when my wife said DLI. So,
Oh, interesting.
um,
Gotcha. Beautiful area.
oh, gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous.
But I'm an old head, so that's why I didn't. But you'll notice, actually, that's a really good point that you just brought up. So I don't know if everybody else on the call just caught what you just said. You said, yeah, I noticed you put Monterey. You didn't put Fort Ord on your LinkedIn. You put Monterey. That was very intentional, right? Because Fort Ord's the way we speak. Like us 270 people on this call, okay, a few of us know Fort Ord, and I'd love to talk about it all day. And DLI, okay, we totally get that. However, to the rest of the world, it's Monterey.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up.
No, that's actually a very good point. And I've talked to several people about that when I'm doing one-on-one, talking about their resume and they're writing, Fort whatever or Navy base, whatever. It's like, okay, that's great for us, and if you're going to get a contract position or, back into government, they'll understand what that is. But
Yes.
I think one of the pieces of advice I did get from TAPS when I did go through TAP is that they actually talked about no, put the major city that's next to it or around it because people are going to understand where that is geographically more than they will say, Fort Bragg, right? Or some of these other bases. So that no, I appreciate you saying that because that's something that we do talk about here as far as resume writing goes, to be a little bit more clear on where we've been. But obviously, over the course of your career, and then looking back on the number of successes that you've had, I do want to talk about maybe a potential setback that you've had because we do bring on a lot of folks that talk about their success and whatnot. I'd like to focus on maybe one instance where you have kind of failed and kind of had to take a step back in your career and then how you overcame that process or that issue.
Gosh, I've had a lot of failure. Um, we could have another hour on this. I think so let me give you an example of a failure. I interviewed for a role for 6 months. I was employed for 3 months, and that was not a success story. And it was a major, well-known company, a senior level role. It was my dream job. I turned down other opportunities for it. It was out of state, so it was going to, if we had relocated for it, it would have caused my family a lot of agita. It already caused a lot of agita that I was away from them for 3 months. Um, they ended up letting a third of the company go because at that time in 2008, there was uh, a meltdown on Wall Street, and it was just an excuse to cut a lot of headcount. They were worried that people weren't going to spend money. It was almost like a, I don't want to compare the loss of lives to it. That's not the right analogy, but there was a lot of panic in 2008. And so I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I turned down another job opportunity. I went all in on this opportunity. For 6 months. I interviewed and I exercised my references, and I was there for 3 months. And this was my dream job. So not it wasn't just any job. It was like the ultimate role that I thought I had won out on. And that was a massive setback at that moment. However, is you got to pick up and you got to keep going. So, I ended up interviewing, I got another role, and it was right after that point, having that other experience of that massive setback, that I started thinking, well, wait a second. Why would I, why am I going to continue to subject myself to these 6 month long interview processes for 3 months when, for 9 months I could be working. I could just be doing this myself. Like, what do I need this for? So in a way, it did propel me into that direction. Um, it also, looking back, gave me insight around, sometimes you have an idea in your head of what something's going to be like, and then when you actually get there, the idea and what actually is there is very different. So, in the interviewing process, even outside of the interviewing process, you want to do a lot of checking, backdoor checking, reference checking, go on Glassdoor. If you're not familiar with Glassdoor, it gives reviews of companies. Like, you absolutely should be going on Glassdoor and reading each one of those employees that blindly post up there and tells you what the experience is like. So anyway, that was a setback. Uh, was it really uncomfortable for a period of time? It absolutely was. But life goes on, and you just got to you got to keep going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It calls in the resilience and stuff like that of persevering through those struggles and hurdles that you do go through. And you mentioned Glassdoor. Yeah, Glassdoor is a great resource because those voices and those reviews are coming from actual folks that work there and have gone through the process. And another great thing about Glassdoor, and there's a couple other websites out there, but Glassdoor gives a very good depiction when you're talking about salary expectations for roles. Glassdoor has a great way because it pulls that information straight from people that have worked there. So you're getting an accurate feedback of what to expect, especially when you're going into salary negotiations, if possible, for companies. And I appreciate that. I wanted to open up, obviously for our students, if anybody has any questions for you, go ahead and click on the raise hand button. I'll give you a shout. You guys can ask your question. But I do want to say, John, I greatly appreciate you coming today and talking about your journey, your experience, and giving those insights of your vast career that you've had, up the ranks, if it were, on the outside, on the civilian side, and also the creation of a business um, that you're doing, and then obviously what you do to give back to our community on the veteran side. So I want to say thank you for that.
It's an honor. Thanks for having me, and hopefully, I'm open for questions here, and I hope something here resonates. I don't know. I threw a lot out there. Hopefully, something resonated.
Yeah, and I want to drop your LinkedIn too, if you don't mind, and if folks want to connect with you afterwards, they can reach out to you, ask questions and stuff, and kind of pick your brain on different things. I see that you already posted it, so no, I appreciate that. But yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Yes, sir. John, thank you so much for hopping on this call today. It's been a pleasure hearing your story and the things that you have. As I was looking through your LinkedIn, I noticed that you were an instructor at the University of Berkeley. I'm currently right down the road from you in Vacaville. I was curious if I could come out and just meet with you, just powwow and talk about some stuff. I also had a question in this moment. Um, as you're an instructor and as you're teaching people, what are those uh, traits that you notice with people who are willing to start a business right out of college, or what things do you notice that like you can see people who are going to be business owners in the future or CEOs in the future? What differentiates those people from just like a regular worker?
Hmm. Really good question. You asked a lot of questions there. So, let me start. Did you say Vacaville?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes,
gotcha.
sir.
So you're in California then?
Yep. Right up the
Okay,
road from me.
gotcha. I apologize if I misspoke there. I used to live in the Bay Area. I'm now in Nashville. Um,
Oh,
and I got my graduate degree from Berkeley while I was out there. So that's probably what you're seeing there,
gotcha.
distance wise. So if you want to grab a drink down on Broadway here in Nashville, I'm happy to do
I
it.
would love to.
To answer your other question though about the traits, what separates, look, I think anybody on this call has the ability to be a business owner because a business owner has to have tenacity. They have to kind of get things done. They have to be disciplined. We have what it takes, and that's why veteran ownership, business ownership, is higher than that of the civilian side. I don't remember the exact percentages. You chat GPT or Google it. I'm sure they'll tell you. But uh, we're designed for this kind of work. Um, if I were to say any one trait, I think it's really the perseverance trait because when you own your own business, there's high highs and low lows versus in my corporate side, there's a lot more creature comforts. Um, Creature comforts that we never had in the service, or I never had in the service. Maybe you guys had it in the service, but I don't remember having a lot of creature comforts in the service. Um, so it can be a little easier experience on the commercial side, but the perseverance I feel on the small business side, if you don't have that, then and maybe a little bit of an appetite to take risk, which as veterans, non-special operators, not all of us like a lot of risk, um, but you have to have a little tolerance for risk because you're jumping into things that you have no idea if you're doing them right or not. You got to figure it out along the way. So those would be the elements that I'd say be the strongest areas.
Yeah, great question, Richard. Thanks for that. Like I said, if anybody else has a question for John this afternoon, just go ahead and hit the raise hand button. We'll give you a chance to ask your question. Um, we'll give it a second here for anybody that wants to willing to kind of take a risk, as it were, and ask that question. Obviously, asking questions is a great way because we talk about too, and we've talked about in foundations. Being able to come up with those questions and ask those questions. Questions is what you should be asking during your interview process too, right? Learning how to speak to somebody and come out of your comfort zone and ask the tough questions. Ask those questions to a fellow employer, and you can use John here as kind of that sounding board, if you were. Go ahead, Sam.
Hey, John, how you doing? So
Great. How are
I'm
you?
looking to transition here shortly, and I've always had a niche for trying to go back into agriculture because I grew up that way of trying to raising beef cattle, trying to ultimately with the end goal of trying to sell to end consumers with full beef product, i.e., half cow, full cow, what have you. So, any thoughts, recommendations on that?
Yeah, really good question. And this would hold true whether you're going in agriculture or anybody else going into a line of business. I try to find another veteran, and there's a lot of them that have made that exact transition to agriculture. And do I know anybody off the top of my head? No, but I know a lot of the entrepreneur boot camp for veterans program, people that come out of that. There are several that have gone down that path of agriculture. So I would try to either find somebody who's done it or go on LinkedIn and find somebody who's done it. And when I say somebody, it's another veteran that will be more likely to take your call out of the blue unless you know somebody who can connect you to that person. You got to somehow find your way to somebody who's done that transition before. You're not the first. You won't be the last, but I think you got to find somebody who's done that exact move, and those would be the paths that I would look to go find those kind of people.
Copy. So like a boost to business sort of thing, reaching out there and starting there.
Or their alumni or somebody like, hey, you pose the exact same question. I'm looking to talk to a veteran who's done this. Who do you suggest I talk with? Yes, 100%. Or you could do that at the VFW. You could do it at IVMF, EBV. There's a bunch of different ways. Like I'd put that out there a couple different ways because who knows what you may or may not hear back either.
Cool. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, we had ACP on here. I think it was last week or whatnot. ACP, those American Corporate Partners, they can do a great job if because obviously you're talking about kind of a niche type endeavor. They can help you get connected with somebody that you're looking for and help you get connected with a veteran that's in that space as well. So I would encourage you to reach out to that resource, ACP, to get connected and start having that conversation with somebody that's kind of walked in those shoes that you want to walk in. Go ahead, Daniel.
Perfect. How are you doing, John?
Great. How are you?
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And so to me, I'm definitely picking up a lot of what you're saying. And I'm going to go back to specifically two things that I wrote down because it moved me in this way. You said we say a lot because we only hope that people will just get a little bit of it, right? So what happens when we say a lot, but we start losing the purpose because we're drowning out our audience? How, as leaders, can we start saying a little to make the impact that we're really trying to make and the connection with those folks? Because I see when two passions can collide sometimes, it can create miscommunication and other things that I'd love to talk to you about. And so it's a way of expression that's really important, but if we don't do it right, we're not going to connect with the right people on the right level. So how would you answer that?
So let me just ask a clarifying question. Can you give me an example? Like, is there something in your life that you've seen there that's kind of played out?
No, absolutely. So for example, in my life, I'm very faith driven, right? So I'll put that out there. And then the moments that I have is, hey, we have to slow down in how we communicate with folks. And sometimes when I'm raising girls, I might say too much or I might not say enough. So it's finding that balance, where they can see the action behind the words and communicating that. So it's really, to me, if that makes enough sense there with what I'm trying to connect here. And it was based off of, hey, we say a lot, hoping that people can just take a little. But in the same sense is just like, when do we know we're losing our folks in the audience that we're really trying to connect with? Finding that balance.
Yeah, really good question. And I had jet black hair before my 24-year-old twin daughters, so I can relate to saying a lot and not necessarily everything landing there. It's that too. We could probably have an hour discussion around about how to best communicate there. But I think what I look for in any kind of opportunity is I'm looking for engagement. And let me make that real. If nobody asked me any questions here, I'd be like, holy shit, my message just didn't land at all. Right? Like that means I was out in right field. Let me boil that into my business. I do a proposal, I do all this work, and I'm the one following up saying, did you get my proposal? How's it look? And I don't hear anything. Like I'm looking for the pull in engagement. It's taken me a really long time to get to that point
Mm-hmm.
because as veterans, this is a blind spot, I think, or it might be a John blind spot, or it might be both. We're very literal people. We're very concrete. You know, you show up at 12 o'clock Eastern for a 1 hour presentation, and I showed up 10 minutes early.
Right.
On the civilian side, that wouldn't happen. They'd show up 5 after, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Right. So, or they'll say, oh, we'll get back to you on Tuesday. And Tuesday comes and goes, and you're like, it's fucking Tuesday. Like,
Right.
what?
Where's the time?
Yeah. What?
And you should be aware of this. And this will make it more real, right? So, and I hate to take up time. So if this is a better conversation offline, I'd love to connect with you there. But I started softball with my daughter yesterday, and her boyfriend, and they asked me to support, right? So I show up and everybody's all over the place. And I'm like trying to support. But my whole life, I've had a non-mission failure. So when do I step in and lead and say, hey, this is what we need to do? All the parents you see here, we have to bring together. Or do I just stand back? And then when I did step up and do it, she was like, Dad, I felt like you overstepped. But I was like, honey, I didn't want what you're building to fail. That's what my heart is. So it's finding that type of balance. And I have all of the best, reasons to do it. She has all the best reasons to do it. And we're doing the right thing, but we just weren't aligned. And that's the message that I want my daughter to understand, my heart, what it speaks. And that's the balance I'm talking, if that makes more sense.
Yeah, no, I feel you. Because even to this day, I do things and my daughters roll their eyes, and it's like I don't know if anything's landing. Quite frankly,
Right.
I'm not getting I'm getting the negative engagement, similar to what
Yeah.
you're getting.
And to me, it's self-awareness, right? It's
Right.
teaching a lesson. I understand what's happening. Now I step back and I have to teach in a way she understands. That's the message.
You're doing the right thing, I think, by setting an example. So one day on Earth, you and I are not going to exist, but you're setting a good example that she may not in the moment say, you know what, Daniel, I really appreciate Dad that you stepped in, and she'll never say that, but down the road, I'm hoping the payoff will come. So, but I had jet black hair before my twin daughters, so I can't say that's a success story.
So, but I'd love to connect with you. I'll reach out. There's some things that I'm passionate about, I'm working on, and this is that leap of faith for me. So thank you for the time to connect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Somebody just said you're planting seeds.
One last question. Go ahead, Rich. I see your hand back up.
Yes, sir, John. I'm super sorry. I had to ask this
no
question. So all the time we hear that people are using AI in the wrong way, right? We're not using it, to ask these bigger questions, to like use it for its full capacity, right? I was curious, right? How do you use it in your business? What helps you, and in what capacity are we supposed to be using it instead of just like working on resumes or these types of little things? What can we use it in like a bigger capacity? Because it's such a good tool. I want to use it correctly,
Yeah, great question. We could spend an hour on this. This is one of my favorite topics. So I don't know about you guys, but I've got 6 different AI apps that are installed on my mobile phone. And this is a Google Pixel, which, I'm a techno nerd. So I had this when this first came out. So I've been beating on AI, Google Pixel, for over a year. I don't know if there's any right or wrong way to use AI. I think people are maybe saying that to kind of make themselves more important because everybody is brand new to everybody. I mean, I just said, yeah, I've been doing this for a year. Okay. That might be a year or more than everybody else on here, but you can catch up to that. That's not that big of a deal. I use it extensively. So I lost 20 pounds between November and May by feeding it information about my diet. I'm now feeding it information about, I bike ride on the side. I've done about 2,000 miles this year. I'm feeding it information on that and my sleeping patterns, trying to optimize that. Business wise, so my business is kind of unique, right? Like I'm doing software optimization, but I'm talking with a lot of people. I use something called Notebook LM, which is a Google free tool that compares and contrasts a lot of different data. I've downloaded all the people that I talked to. I talked to 10 people in a company. I upload it to Notebook LM, which is secure. And then I say, what are the gaps? or what are the commonalities, common themes, and the gaps. So I've used it for that. And that's been extremely helpful. I think that there's opportunities that you could, there's programmatic opportunities, and this is where Adam would be brilliant at. They call the agentic AI, where you could build an agent. I also have a brain. I don't really advertise this, but I'll share it amongst us 293 chickens here. I've developed a repository of all of my conversations and work over the last 5 years since COVID that I query and I create blogs from. And why that's valuable is I can take things that are very topical and put it online and get a lot of engagement on it on my website. And that's very valuable. Those are valuable eyeballs to get in this environment. But that took me a long time. That's taken me 5 years to build. But it's AI, I think, is just going to be everywhere. It's going to be like oxygen. You're not going to be able to survive without it. So, if you can just experiment, look at a business, and you're going to have to almost, like, if you're going into a business or you're starting a business, you're going to have to figure out what can AI be doing to make it better, to save costs or to drive revenue quicker. What is it that can be automated as part of AI? There's a lot of AI coursework that you can take on Coursera, I think, is one example. Maybe at Seven Eagle, you guys have AI stuff too. But I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I think the people that are saying that are just trying to peacock themselves and say, look, I know more than you. I call bullshit. Nobody knows a whole lot about this. Everybody's learning it at the same time. So it's a different world right now. I don't know if that answers your question.
John, I appreciate that. That was a great answer. You have obviously a lot more knowledge and a lot more uses for it at this moment, but still, as a young person, it's great to see that perspective and be able to know that it's going to be useful in the future and even right now in this moment. So I appreciate that.
100%.
Yeah, no, great question, Richard. Hey, Jamal, I'd love to get your question, but we are over time. If you want to connect with John separately, reach out to him on his LinkedIn, message him. But John, again, I want to thank you so much for coming in as a mentor to our academy today and giving your feedback, giving your insights and your journey and giving those and pouring back into our veteran community. I greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Matt, a great opportunity, and I wish everybody here best of luck on this transition. I know it's not easy, but it's doable, and you're doing the right thing by you're getting in these classes, you're asking questions, you're showing an interest. So you're on your way, and you're better than you think you are. So good luck with the transition.
Awesome. Thank you, John. You have a fantastic day.
Thanks, you too.
All right, everybody. So that concludes our first blocks for this for today. You guys are released for lunch. You guys have a fantastic lunch. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you back here.